Oh, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cuppa.tv. How are you for this Tuesday morning? Well, it's Cookie back here for Open Book. Can't wait to be welcoming in Fleur very, very soon. But before I kick it off, I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, and I want to recognise their continuing connections to lands, water, and community. I pay my respects to them and to their cultures and to the elders, both past, present, and emerging. Another big thanks to all the Indigenous leaders that have appeared here on Cuppa and have shared their wisdom, their knowledge with us. We've got a very important week coming up this week, so please make sure that you do your research, you understand a little bit more all about it, and make that vote count. So thank you, everyone, for joining us once again. We are back for our next open book now. Fleur Heazlewood. Hopefully I got that right. I didn't even ask you, Fleur, how do you say your last name? I'm really bad at last names, Fleur. She's the leadership expert and founder of the Blueberry Institute. She's got over 20 years corporate leadership experience, and she partners with leaders in HR to create healthy, high-performing teams and organizations. She has trained and mentored over 3,000 people in positive leadership, future fit resilience, and mental health mastery. This is her second book that I'm going to be bringing up. It's all about leading well-being. But Fleur, welcome to Cuppa. How are you?
Very well, and extremely happy to be here, especially as it's World Mental Health Day, and our theme this year is mental health is everyone's right. So I think a very topical theme for our conversation today.
Well, it is World Mental Health Day. We've got a cracking day of conversation starting off with you, Fleur. So thank you so much for joining us for a cuppa this morning. Leading well-being. How did you even get into the well-being space, Fleur? Like, what's your story? Because usually many of us have a story.
My story is probably not unlike many other stories, particularly when it comes to those of us who are building our corporate careers. So I came out of university and I started on a graduate trainee program, and I set myself what felt like quite a big, I guess, hairy, audacious goal of becoming a CEO, and I wanted to be CEO before I was 40 years old. So I was that classic overachieving, overworking, high achiever, making sure that not only, I guess, was I doing my job well, but I was doing it better and faster and more innovative and more creative to demonstrate that I was worthy of this type of a career. And I guess where my story changes a little bit and why wellbeing has become such a core anchor of what I do when I'm supporting people with high performance is that I worked myself so hard and I achieved so well that I also got to the point where I burnt out, and I burnt out in quite a spectacular way. And I like to think that I'm also an overachiever in burnout, or a pioneer in burnout, because I experienced burnout before it was even invented. So we're going back, going back about 10 years now.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly, right? So the World Health Organization actually only, formally defined burnout in 2019. So it's quite interesting that, that quite significant health issue has taken so long to be caught up and be formally recognised. And why this matters from a working perspective is for many, many years, there's been this expectation that you achieve what you need to at work, and then you figure out your own health and well-being and how you're coping and what those life skills and so forth are by yourself and in your own time. So one of the things, I guess, particularly the pandemic has now shown us is that you can't separate people into here's the home person and here's the work person. It's not realistic and it's not real. But also I've spent a lot of time figuring out how do we put the healthy back into high performance, and also understanding that well-being isn't a project, and well-being isn't something that's nice to have, and well-being isn't a series of initiatives. Well-being is actually a set of skills and capability, and it's a foundation for culture. Because the reality is if people aren't well at work, we're not going to be able to create sustainable, healthy, high performance moving forward. So my career trajectory has definitely come out of my own experience of high performance and burning out. And it's not helpful to anyone or any of our organisations or teams to burn out our high performance. I mean that's not a good use of talent either. But the other thing also is we don't need to burn out to achieve high performance. We just need to do things a little bit differently and learn some more of those life skills.
So good. But yeah, so true. Like, we hear it all the time. Actually, we've just put out a little survey to people in culture leaders, and you'd think by now that we have everything under control because we've spoken about well-being for so long now, but it's still the biggest concern in workplaces. And most of that concern is because the leaders are actually fatigued and exhausted and unflourishing like they used to. And, we're actually really in a critical juncture here because, for businesses to keep high performance there, well-being needs to be the priority focus for the teams and for the leaders. Now, your book, which I've got here in my hot little hands, Leading Wellbeing, you've filled it with all your IP. Firstly, were you concerned that you just put everything into a book? And what's your hope, or what's your hope for those readers or those leaders who pick up this book?
The reason for writing the book and bringing it out now and putting so much of the how do we do these conversations, how do we better look after people at work into a book comes from the fact that we still have 1 in 5 or 20% of people right now in our teams every day with a diagnosable mental illness. So it's not a niche problem, it's actually quite a common and large-scale problem. The other part of that too is 50% of people with a diagnosable mental illness are actually not getting help. So that means in any team, sort of like, 1 in 10 or, 10% of us are also struggling without any kind of help whatsoever. And if we look at the stats, our stats are showing that our financial stress, stressors, burnout, mental health is still on the rise. And unless we do something significantly different, we're not going to be supporting people to be well and to stay well. And so from my perspective, I think the more of us that are having these conversations, the better. But one of the biggest barriers to people having these conversations is we don't know what to say. We don't know how to approach someone in the workplace. We're scared of saying the wrong thing. And so what I'm finding is that people are still not having the conversations, even when they recognise that someone's not doing so well. So from my perspective, my vision is how do we make sure that people are both safe and well at work? And so putting that conversation know-how into a book that anyone can access is way more important to me than the number of programs that I'm conducting in this area. And to be perfectly fair, I think we start with learning the framework, but people still need the training support to actually practice and understand that it's okay and that it's welcome to be having these conversations at work.
Yeah, so good, because it needs to, like we said before, it needs to continuously happen. Fleur, last 5 to 6 months, and I've been chatting to people in culture leads, and money's being not necessarily money's being pulled from wellbeing initiatives because some companies are tightening their budget, and then they're relying more on the EAP to provide everything for them that they have. But we all know that EAPs don't necessarily impact everyone, and definitely usually the EAPs are not there from that preventative measure space, or being able to educate the leaders on how to have better conversations in this area. What would you say to wellbeing leads, people in culture leads, CEOs, CFOs on maybe stepping up their wellbeing game versus pulling it back?
When it comes to mental health and wellbeing, I encourage people to look at this as a skill set as opposed to a project. So just as we invest and develop leadership programs overall in terms of our leadership skills, mental health conversation skills, psychological safety skills, and wellbeing skills actually sit within our overall leadership toolkit. And I think part of the problem that we have with our budgets is that many people view wellbeing projects and initiatives as nice to have. So it's ways of celebrating days and ways of celebrating things, but there's a frustration with our executive team and our budget holders that say, look, we're spending all this money on this stuff, but what's actually happening? And it's really important, or I think it's really important, that we look at mental health and wellbeing and resilience skills as a capability set. And so when we are viewing this as part of our leadership development programs, and we're looking at this as a capability set, what we will find is that we will have those preventative and supportive measures in place. Because the reality is once people get as far as the employee assistance program, they're generally extremely unwell. They're a high safety risk for themselves. They're also, unfortunately, considered a risk factor to the workplace as well. And we also know that people who do become extremely well with mental illness actually cost, I think it's like 5 to 6 times more than a physical health or illness once it gets to that point on the balance sheet. And so when we're talking budgets, one of the things I'd like to encourage our people teams, our safety teams and our executive teams to understand is that while this touches each of those areas, this is actually a really important organisational investment in prevention management and actually taking some of that mental health risk and cost off the balance sheet.
Yeah, perfect. I'm going to send this little clip to a few people, FYI, because it's true. Because they talk about what's the ROI. Well, the ROI is sometimes unseen because you just don't know from the level of productivity and what that person's going through, and to be able to have and equip the leaders to be able to have better conversations in this area is first and foremost. Like both you and I agree that conversations are key in this area. And I suppose now I want to get into the depths of your book a little bit around, what are the factors involved in being able to have more confident and more aware conversations with your team around wellbeing and mental health. You've created this mental health mastery approach. What does it consist of, and what's involved in it?
The mental health mastery framework or approach is around helping everyday leaders and people have everyday mental health conversations with confidence around what signs to look out for, how do I approach someone appropriately in a working environment, what do I say, so how do I get started, and also what is my role in this versus what my role isn't. And one of the things, particularly in the workplace, is that we're all taught that to be successful here, there's no such thing as a problem, only a solution. Or don't come to me with a problem, come to me with how you're going to fix it. And we take that sort of like mental schema into our mental health conversations, or we don't have the mental health conversations because we go, oh my goodness, what if someone comes back to me and says that they're not okay? It then becomes my job to fix it. And I'm not the expert and I don't know how to do that. And so one of the things that I support people with in the book is actually understanding that our role as everyday colleagues and leaders at work is not to solve for someone, but to create a safe space where someone feels comfortable enough to share when they're not feeling okay, and to support them in reaching out to the professional help that's going to be most useful for them. And so I tend to find at this point in the conversation, there's this big sigh of relief that goes, oh my goodness, I don't have time to fix it. And we talked about, our leaders and managers that are burning out themselves at the moment. So we're responsible for getting work done. We're responsible for looking after our teams. Somewhere in the midst of all this, we're trying to get our own work done as well. And so it's usually our managers and leaders that are the ones that are being squeezed the most and have the most pressure when it comes to how they're feeling in terms of their own mental health. And so when you're saying to someone, hey, you're now responsible for the psychological safety and the mental health and wellbeing of your teams as well, they're going, oh my goodness, just one more thing that I can't cope with right now. And the good news is, and this is where I'm hoping to encourage people to feel a little bit more comfortable about these conversations, is it's actually not our role to do that fixing. It's actually our role to make it safe for someone to share what's going on and to know that it's okay for them to figure out what it is that they are going to need to support them on their healing journey. And so with the mental health mastery framework, I step people through how do we prepare for a conversation? What are the signs? What do I say? How do I ask someone? How do I respond when someone says I'm not okay? What do I do next? How do I support them? What are the things that I should be doing? And what are the things that I don't need to be doing? And the reality is that it doesn't take a lot of extra time and it doesn't create extra stress and pressure. It actually takes some stress and pressure off by having these conversations early and knowing that it's not our job to project manage, someone as a project or, as a specific pathway of action at work.
Love it. Can I just ask you, what are some of the things that we should be looking at as leaders? Like, what are some of the, potential red flags that we may see in someone? And then I'm going to throw the other question, because I know we said it in the pre-chat. Like, I think we're speaking close to Are You Okay Day, and we're having that question of, is Are You Okay the right way to start a conversation? So, firstly, can you just share what we should be looking out for? And then B, how do we approach the conversation if we do feel that someone is struggling with their mental health?
So one of the things that many of us struggle with is, how do we recognise the signs when someone might not be travelling so well? And one of the things that makes this difficult is that there actually is no one-size-fits-all sort of like set of signs where you can go through and go tick, 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 tick. The other thing as well is, unlike a physical illness or a physical injury, it's not necessarily evident just by scanning and looking at someone that they might not be doing so well in terms of their mental health. And so there's sort of like 3 categories of things that I'm encouraging people to look at. And the first one is we're looking for differences in physical appearance and, I guess, behavioural reactions that are different to how that person would usually show up. And so what we're looking for are changes in what we would describe as a person's normal appearance and normal ways of interacting, reacting, going about getting their work done and having their conversations and so forth. And you'll tend to find that there's both physical signs as well as behavioural signs. So physical signs might be changes in appearance. People might be looking more tired. They may not be on top of their personal presentation. We might notice that they're more increasingly sick. We might notice that they're struggling to get to work on time. We might notice that they're checking out of work early. We might notice that they're present at meetings but not present, struggling to sort of like interact. And then from a behavioural perspective, looking for differences in the intensity of their emotions and how they're sharing. So people overreacting to small things, people bursting into tears over things that wouldn't usually bother them, people being quick to anger or quick to being frustrated or irritated. Or we might see some underwhelming responses. And what I mean by that is we're withdrawing from conversations. We're not showing up to meetings on topics that are important to us. We're not contributing to conversations on topics that we know that person would otherwise feel passionately about. And so there's generally going to be a range of sort of like 3 or 4 or 5 little signs that will all add up to give us a bit of a picture that says, hey, I think there's like something that's sort of like, a little bit wrong or a little bit off, or there's something else that's going on here. And one of the things I encourage everyone to do is to sort of like note down what those signs are and to almost like build a little map of, what are those things that are giving me this gut feel or this intuitive feel that there's, something that's, not traveling quite right for this particular person. And one of the reasons why it helps to write down those little signs is because the best question for checking in with someone is actually a direct question, sharing what it is that you have noticed about them. Right. And this is generally counterintuitive to what most of us have learned over the years. It's like, don't get too personal. Ask a broad question so that you're not, accidentally traveling into personal territory that someone, might get offended with. But the reality is so, Luke, if I was to say, hi, how are you? You're most likely to come back and say, good, how are you?
One.
Yeah, or just hi. Because one of the things that we're finding in terms of just our local conversations and vernacular is those broad questions have just become another version of a greeting. We're not actually expecting someone to come back and say, well, actually, this is what's going on, and my dog did this, and, my daughter's home from school today because she's got a cold, and actually, my wife's cranky with me because I didn't take out the rubbish last night.
Have you been spying on me this morning? Have you been spying on me this morning?
I think most of us can relate to this in some way, right? Yeah, exactly. So, hi or, how are you actually isn't a helpful question, and it's unlikely to show someone that you genuinely want to know what's going on for them, and that you're here to actually listen to anything, regardless of whether it's work related or life related. And that brings up a challenge for us with "Are you okay?" as a question. So I absolutely love "Are you okay?" Day, and I love the fact that we have this great day that everyone recognises and understands that is distinctly about checking in with those that we care about. And we know from the stats that we're not doing this, so these days are extremely, extremely important.
Yeah.
Are you okay as an actual question in of itself is not the best way to start a conversation. It's a good check back in kind of question, but it's not necessarily a good starting question. Because if I ask you, are you okay? You can come back to me and say, good, bad, fighting fit, stressed, busy. It's an example of another closed question, and it's another one of those questions where people kind of go, oh yeah, here's one of those greetings, a different version of a greeting. The other thing about "Are you okay?" is it's a little bit leading. So if I ask you, "Are you okay?" you're more likely to mirror back to me and say, "Yes, Fleur, I am okay." See, there's something that's in that question which kind of like says, reassure me that you're okay, and I don't have to go and have this tricky, uncomfortable question. So we're more likely to get "Oh, fine, nothing to see here, all good." Just the usual as a response. And so for me, the best type of check-in question for a regular person like you and I'm not a psychologist or a trained counsellor or so forth. So people often say to me, "Oh, look, this is easy for you because you know this stuff." It's like, guess what, guys? I've had to learn this stuff just like you have. My background's a leadership background. My background is not a psychologist and an HR background. So the best question for me is to actually ask someone or share with someone, this is what I've noticed about you. This is not like your usual self. I am concerned about you, and I'd like to understand more. So it might sound something along the lines of, hey, Luke, I've noticed you've been a little bit quiet this last week. This isn't like your usual, chatty, hosting self. I'm a bit concerned about you. How are things going for you at the moment?
Perfect.
So if you are showing someone that you've noticed how they are and what's going on for them, and you genuinely want to know the answer, you're more likely to get a genuine response from someone that actually acknowledges that you've taken the time to notice and you're interested in their well-being.
Are these conversations, do you think, and I know we're talking about educating leaders on the ability to be able to feel strong in these conversations, to be able to have these more often. But I don't know, this is just me just feeling like there's a little bit of, what's the words I'm trying to say here? In society, it feels like everyone is so fatigued and experiencing overload themselves that they don't want to check in because they don't want to absorb other people's challenges. Are you sensing that as well? Even if it's leaders, even if it means better productivity, like because we're so overwhelmed ourselves, are less of these conversations likely to occur because of that?
That's one of the key factors around why we're not having these conversations at work. So many of us are overtired, overwhelmed, overstressed. We've got so much on our to-do list that we're not already getting through. This can often feel like, oh my goodness, one more thing that I should be doing that I just don't have the energy for. So it is this compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
And so compassion fatigue is a real thing. And the reality is we've come out of 3 years worth of pandemic where we've been focusing a lot on other people. But also within that, we haven't been taking the breaks and the holidays and switching off from the technology. We've got this like physical blurring now between, home and work in home offices and so forth. And so coming into this year, there was almost this collective sigh that says, okay, now can we move past COVID? And of course, we've now been hit by this economic uncertainty and this financial insecurity as well. And so we're actually in year 4 now of operating on 50%, energy or below par resilience. And we have a lot of people that are experiencing burnout coming into this year going, look, I just don't have anything left in the tank. And so even though we've got greater awareness around the need to have these conversations, many of us are just saying, you know what, I just do not have that capability or the capacity right now. And one of the things I want to say to people that are experiencing this is that it's actually okay if you're not okay. And the first step in helping others is actually to support yourself. And so if you're a manager or a leader that's feeling a little bit wobbly, give yourself permission to do what it is that you need to do to look after your mental health and well-being first. So there's a reason why our airline safety instructions say, you know, put your own oxygen mask on before helping others. So you don't need to sort of like go and expend that extra effort helping somebody else when you're actually not in good shape yourself. So when you've got some support in place for you and you're taking a little bit of time out for you and regrouping that way, it's then okay to go and have the conversations that you need to do. You know, we can often be quite hard on ourselves, and I find particularly our managers and our leaders are prioritising everyone else at the expense of their own mental health and well-being. And I guess the nice thing about these conversations is that it's also not your job to fix someone. And I'm putting fix in quotes because that seems to be the manager leader role in general. See a problem, fix it. You know, our role is simply to check in. So, Luke, if you were to come back and say, actually, you know what, Fleur, I'm not going okay at the moment. There's a whole bunch of stressors, you know, that are going on at home, and I'm actually feeling a little bit wobbly. My response would be to say, wow, it sounds like you're having a really tough time. Do you have supports for that? So do you have supports for that doesn't mean let me give you a whole bunch of suggestions and solutions. So it can be as simple as, wow, validating or empathizing with what the person's going for, and then asking, do you have some supports for that?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Okay, what can we do to provide you with a bit of flexibility at work for you to be able to make those appointments or take advantage of those supports?
Yeah, and what you're doing for that is you're getting them to say their own solutions, and yes, guiding them where need be, but not taking that all in yourself. I think that's very important, especially like what we were talking about right now, when leaders they're in their own capacity overload and, you know, compassion fatigue and all the rest of the challenges that are still existing in there. That it's more the guiding side of things that you're talking about, and taking them on a path of well-being and looking after yourself first. So I think it's really critical. Fleur, we're getting close to time, but I've got a few big questions for you. One is I want to ask you, and I like asking this from some of our experts to just get a point of difference in some of our conversations as well, but what's the eggshell conversation that we don't have enough of in society, and why is that the case?
One of the things that I take pride in is helping our leaders and managers feel more confident and capable in having the most difficult conversations and some of the most curly conversations. And the big one that, particularly in the mental health space, that people want to know but also won't ask me is, what if I am concerned that someone might be having suicidal thoughts?
Yeah, right.
And there's two parts where people really, really struggle with this. The first one is this is one of our areas of greatest fear. What if I say the wrong thing and I put the idea of suicidal thoughts into someone's head who may not have already been thinking about it? And then the other one is, well, what if they are having suicidal thoughts? I'm not the professional and I might do something wrong. And so my guidance for everyone is the best practice, and evidence shows that if we are concerned about someone who might be having suicidal thoughts, to ask them directly. And most people come back and go, I could never ask something like that. But the reality is our research shows that asking someone if they're having suicidal thoughts does not put the idea into their head if they haven't already been thinking about it. And we also worry, well, what if I ask this and they're not? They might get offended. The worst thing that's going to happen to you by asking someone who's not is like, don't be ridiculous, Fleur, it's not that bad. So if someone take that fear out and put it down, you kind of go, oh, I feel really silly, worrying about that. And so one of the reasons why it's helpful to ask someone directly is because research from helplines like Lifeline show that most people who are considering suicide don't actually want to die. They just can't see any other way out of their heads. And so if we're not making it out of their heads, they can't see any other way out of their pain. And so if we're leaving the suicidal thoughts in their heads, we're not allowing them to externalize it, and we're not making it okay as our concerned colleagues and friends to share something like this, we're not actually helping them to see that there are other options and there are other supports. So asking the direct question, hey, look, I'm concerned about you. Are you having suicidal thoughts? Is actually one of the kindest, most compassionate, caring things that any of us can ask someone that we're concerned about.
Yeah, it's so true, because when someone does commit suicide, you're always left with what else I could have done more. And, having that conversation and putting it out there could be the change or the support that someone needs as well. So don't leave a conversation on the table, get it out. And like what you said, Fleur, there's, probably the worst thing that someone will come back to is, come on, Fleur, I'm not like that. Come on, I'll be fine. But, it is important to get that message out there. Fleur, besides what we've spoken about today, what else will people find when they open your incredible book here with all your IP in it? Like, what else is in there besides those, the Mastery Toolkit for Mental Health?
So some of the things I share in the book that hopefully everyone will find helpful is, how can we actually have our mental health and our wellbeing conversations on an everyday, day-to-day basis. So another reason that stops people from checking in with someone when they're not doing so well is they kind of like go, well, it feels like this is coming out of the blue. And one of the things about psychological safety is that we're actually having wellbeing conversations, and in our one-on-one meetings and team meetings, asking people how they are as well as what they are doing. It means that it's going to be a lot more natural to check in on people when they're not doing so well. So I also talk a little bit through psychological safety. And then from a leadership toolkit perspective, I often have people saying, hey, someone's not doing so well, but they're also not performing at work. And so I step people through actually, how do we support someone with their mental health support at the same time that we manage performance and make sure actually that there's not an undue burden or extra stresses put on the team at the same time. So really trying to support people in that full gamut of most common questions and ways of supporting work and supporting people as well as within the context of we need to get work done in a performance environment.
So important to tackle both of those areas. Now, everyone grab a copy of the book. Sorry, I've lost my camera. Get a copy of the book. The link is down the bottom in the copy there. So please make sure you get this perfect little, stick it in your pocket almost. It's that little pocket size. But yeah, please make sure that you get that as well. Fleur, any final comments before we head off on World Mental Health Day?
Just want to leave people with the notion that, well-being is an important part of performance. And that well-being and looking after your well-being isn't a nice to have. I invite you to consider it as an investment and a necessary in living a life well and working a work life well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fleur, for joining us once again today. Been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation, and thanks for all your incredible words and advice to our Cuppa community. I'll see you later, Fleur.
Thank you.
Now, everyone, please make sure that you continue on the Cuppa journey today. We have Joey Williams coming in and being in conversation with Cam Marchant. Joey's a proud Indigenous man, ex-rugby league player, ex-boxer, who has bipolar and came very close to ending his own life. And he has got incredible words of wisdom today around how you tackle the enemy within. And Cam is an incredible host who will guide Joey on that conversational journey. And then next week, Buying Happiness, Learn to Invest Your Time and Money Better with Kate Campbell. That's our next open book. So please make sure that you do join us next Tuesday. Well, that is it, everyone. We'll see you at 12:30 today for all our incredible members. we'll opening up the cafe doors and having another important conversation on World Mental Health Day. That is it. We'll see you soon. Bye.